right, hello and welcome to another Expert Insight interview. My name is John Golden from Sales Pop, online sales magazine and Pipeliner CRM, joining you as usual from a sunny San Diego. And today I'm delighted to be joined from across the country on the other side, and from Maryland is Jon Bassford. How are you doing, Jon?
I'm doing great. How you doing today?
Excellent. Jon is an operations professional and entrepreneur driven by his curiosity. Curiosity is our superpower, and it's driven his personal and professional advancement. Today, Jon's known for his curiosity-driven leadership, helping organizations and individuals innovate, change, and grow by adopting curiosity as their superpower. And that's what we're going to talk about today is curiosity in leadership and culture in general. So Jon, like I feel today in some ways that, curiosity is becoming a lost art with people, because it's the more access we have to information, social media, and anything, it's almost like the less curious we get, because we're used to just taking these bubblegum bite-sized bits of information and then feeling like, okay, yeah, I learned something new, or I'm curious, but really I'm not. I'm just like being distracted by stuff. It's not true curiosity.
Yeah. I mean, for to be a curious leader, I think there's really kind of three shifts that need to take place. One is mindset. One is about adopting a growth mindset. The other two are operational excellence. Really
Mhm.
being curious about your operations and finding new solutions, solving problems, being proactive. So I look at curiosity, and what you're just talking about there is finding the creative and curious ways to utilize new tools and resources at our exposure to do more, to have more of a bang for our buck, more benefit. The last piece that you kind of mentioned early on was the culture side of things. Creating a curious culture. There's some specific elements that really have to happen to make that work.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And I think the other part too is, like, I think the curiosity is sometimes misunderstood by those on the receiving end of it, right? Sometimes, if, as you said, I mean, curiosity in operations and in improving things, sometimes, people will receive that as, questioning, or, defensiveness or whatever. So how you execute, if you like, your curiosity, there's an art to that as well, right?
100%. I mean, they're to a certain degree, a curious leader has to have some humility about
Mhm.
himself or herself, right? You have to create operations around curiosity and culture on curiosity. You have to let loose a little bit. You have to let go of the notion of, like, I created this business or this organization 20 years ago, hasn't failed me yet. I'm not listening to anyone else, right? Like,
Right.
you got to let go of those pieces. You got to let information come in. You got to let feedback come in from different directions. Allow everyone to be a part of the process and the success of the vision of the organization as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really really key point that you just made there, because yeah, I think the humility aspect and the looking for new ideas, because let's face it, I mean, the longer you're in leadership and the longer you're alive, things are changing so rapidly, and you can't. I mean, the other thing too is, I think, is you have to utilize other people's curiosity as well, because you can't know everything. It's impossible. There's so many specialized tasks and things that you have to encourage curiosity in other people too, and you have to kind of have a culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah, 100%. And I have a great story about that. A CEO I worked with, who was innovative. He was an entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, and he had an organization that he created. And I was doing some change management with them, and he was famous for asking the staff after a couple years of downturn, why aren't we Amazon?
Mhm.
And I brought an idea to him. I said, look, our competitor over here is beating us in one major area, content. And they're doing it because it's a young audience for this organization, and they're doing it via video content. And we're still writing things. Like, video is
Mhm.
key right now. It's where our audience is. We have to make this shift. And his response was, that's not what I had in mind when I started the organization 27 years ago. Well, my thought is, like, you're kidding me. You didn't know content was going to be king for your video before Instagram, before YouTube,
uh,
before TikTok. You didn't. I mean, had you had that forethought, you would have founded those instead of this organization. So again, he was someone who was willing to make some changes and think entrepreneurial, but he got stuck in his own ways. There's a point in which the change became just a tad too much for him, and so we gotta keep ourselves agile, nimble, and can have that little bit of humility there to really stay open to what can help drive the organization forward.
Yeah, because let's face it, John. I mean, with the pace of change right now, and with AI, and with all the things that are happening, AI agents are going to be like huge this year and stuff. Is that unless you're innovating, unless you're being curious, unless you're questioning everything, you're going to get left behind. So that's a phenomenal example that you just used, because you're right. If you had if you had foreseen content 27 years ago, you would have started one of those video platforms, and you'd now be a billionaire and flying around the globe. But obviously you didn't, and neither did any of the rest of us, apart from the people who did. And so now we have to continually adapt, and I think that's the part that's difficult, John, especially if you've an established business, is suddenly going, shoot, we may have to go somewhat back to the drawing board here.
Yeah, yeah. I'm publishing a book on the Curious Leader that's going to come out in February, and in one part of the book I talk about is being a curious leader is not for everybody. I
Hmm.
talk to business owners all the time who say, we've been running this business for the last 10 years and we're just fine where it is. By all means, don't be curious, right? If that's your mentality, you can leave curiosity on the doorstep. But for people who know the world keeps changing, know they have to keep adapting, know they have to keep changing to stay ahead and to grow and to do more and to be more productive, curiosity has got to be part of that roadmap.
Yeah, I mean, I think 100% that is absolutely, and I think then what you need then is obviously to gather people around you, right? I
Mhm.
mean, and maybe this means a culture shift in your organization. Maybe now, instead of it being so top down, you have to start looking at matrixing the organization. You have to start looking at best ideas win, regardless of where they come from, or you have to acknowledge that there are parts of the organization where it's so specialized that you need specialists there. And again, I think it all comes down to that humility part, John, and the ability to change and adapt, and then to recruit people who will help you in that process.
Yeah, well, on the culture front, Google did a study called the Aristotle Project. They were trying to determine what made teams successful and innovative, and they had their theories on this before they started. But after interviews and surveys and everything, what they came back with was psychological safety.
Hmm.
Leaders who created an environment with psychological safety where people felt they could speak up. They could voice their opinions. They could push back at times. Those were the teams that were the most successful because it allowed the free exchange of ideas, both positive and negative, to come through without people, saying that's not your wheelhouse, that's above your pay grade, but it allowed for that community of thought, right, to really come through. And it's really something I'm working with a lot of organizations right now, executive coaching and workshop wise, to really help leaders see how having that servant leadership, on steroids, with a curious culture can really help change the organization.
Yeah, no, no, I agree, absolutely. And I think though sometimes I tell you, John, sometimes I think we undermine ourselves when we create these, terms like psychological safety and things, because it sounds like more than it should be, right? Psychological safety should be the open communication, right? And break it down simply, but we always put these like labels on things that I think sometimes make people kind of shy away.
Yeah, I mean, culture itself is one, right? I mean, culture
Yeah,
has become a buzzword. It,
yeah,
it's about ping pong tables and fruit carts and all these things, which are absolutely part of culture. There's no doubt about that. But what I'm really talking about with culture is what are our norms and attitudes and management, and how does
yeah.
that dictate what we do on a day to day basis?
Yeah, no, and I agree with you. And to be honest, I don't know anybody who's ever stayed at a company because they had a foosball table and a massage chair. They stayed there because there was something happening with the organization. And I've known people who stayed with organizations that barely give them a desk and a chair, and they're more than happy there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So how can a say you have an organization, and this is probably the type of organizations you often work with. You have an organization that's established, maybe it's doing okay, it's trotting along, like you said. How do you help? If the leader once says, I need to be more curious, I need to start looking into everything, I really want to like question the business from top to bottom. How do you help them through that process?
Yeah. So one thing we've developed recently is a series of audits that we do, which looks at decision making process. It looks at your culture. It looks at your operational excellence and maturity, your efficiency. So many times when one way I look at this is kind of strategic planning with data.
Mhm.
Most times when people do data plan or strategic planning, it's sitting around a table saying, "Where do you want to be in 5 years?" What we do is we come in and we analyze your organization where it is right now, and we help you get curious and remove your biases, remove your blind spots, and let us come in objectively,
Mhm.
analyze your organization, and help you see the areas that need improved upon to grow. And so use that as your foundation for growth and going to the next level is fixing the areas that need to be improved. Then from there, you can do that more aspirational, lofty goals of where you want to be in 5 years because you'll have better metrics on
Mhm.
how to get there.
And once you, I mean, once you do that, and you and the leader co-opts the correct people from wherever the change will be made, then you have something that could be sustainable, and actually something that maybe a lot of those people were probably not around when those processes or whatever were put in place in the first place, and maybe they have some great ideas, and I think it's unlocking that. That's the real power of curiosity.
Yeah, when it comes to operations, we get stuck in habits,
Yeah.
and we are the people that run organizations, so our organizations get stuck in habits, and we just do the same things. And if you don't create these occasional mechanisms to disrupt what we do, at least question what we do. I don't believe in change for the sake of change, but
Sure.
questioning what we do. Is this the right way to be doing it? Is this the most efficient and effective way to drive the results we want? That's the goal. We got to be
Yeah.
analyzing that constantly to see whether it's working or not.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I mean, you have good processes, you just, maintain them, but always looking to see if they can be improved. If they can't be improved right now, moving on. I also just wanted to come back to the culture piece, John, because some people would say, "Well, my organization doesn't really have a culture of such," and you're there like, "Well, yeah, you do. Every organization has a culture. It may be an organic one that's grown up, probably taken its lead from the head of the organization, but you do have a culture, and I think that's one of the first starting points is to recognize what your culture really is."
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you. Every organization has a culture, and if you don't define the culture, it usually one gets created that you usually don't want, right?
Yeah.
That's the truth of it.
Mhm.
And I'm a big believer that culture needs to be led by the top, because if the leaders don't enforce the culture, don't drive the culture, it's going to die off.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they are the ones responsible for the vision of the organization and need to make sure that that culture is going to fulfill that vision, that mission, that those tactics as well for the organization. I see a lot of organizations that will say, "Well, let's bring the staff together and have them create the culture." And I'm like, I get that from a camaraderie
Mhm.
standpoint, but like I truly believe it's got to be dictated by the top, but allowing the influences, allowing the culture, allowing that psychological safety, you know, nest egg as well to allow people to say, look, this is working, that's not working, and really build your culture around that. And that's going to drive the most innovation, growth, and change.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think we and there's a lot of organizations that claim to have a particular culture. They stick it on their website. They do all sorts of things, but the reality is that that doesn't translate into how the organization operates. So, to your point, I think it's really important that if you want to have a place of, if you want to have a culture of psychological safety, of open communications and stuff, then you have to be prepared to have open communications. And let's face it, initially those who are in maybe in lower down the organization are going to be a little suspicious. They're not going to immediately come out with their opinions. They're not immediately going to say, "Oh, I'm free to speak now." So you have to facilitate that piece.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, one thing I put in my book before I realized someone else said it was leaders need to learn to speak last. I've
Mm.
learned that Simon Sinek is also using that as part of one of his TEDx, I believe. But it's true, right? Because what happens when a leader's in a meeting and it's a rehash of something, right? There's always some point to it, and the first thing they do is give their opinion about whatever was happening, then
Mhm.
say, "Let me know your thoughts." You just brought that entire room to side with you. I mean,
Yeah.
you might get a little pushback, you might, but even anyone who's going to say something against what you said, it's going to be watered down. It's not going to be the truth. And
Mhm.
so if you let people speak first, you'll create that environment where people can speak first. And yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, but you got to put these little droppings out there of this is one place to start. I want to hear from you guys first. Having one-on-one meetings with people, learn who your staff are. What makes them tick, what makes them excited to get up in the morning and come to work, and where their future is going, and all of these things, and really helps you utilize them to the best of their potential.
Yeah, and one great way of engaging an organization, especially as you go into a new year like that, is engaging your teams, is to ask them to go and find the things that we shouldn't be doing anymore. Because as you know, John, when you sit down and do strategic planning and you say, what should we do? People are full of ideas. Oh, we should do this, we should do that, we should do the other. But when you say, what should we stop doing? There's normally crickets, right? And I think that's a great place to start with people, because that's just saying, go out and here's our strategy. Now go out and find things in the organization that are not contributing to that.
Right. And I'm a big believer of making that part of everyone's job, right?
Yeah.
Like don't just always, look at how the best way to do what you're being asked to do. Find a better way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I've worked with a manager who I had a feeling was micromanaging her staff, and she, with her permission, I surveyed her staff, and if I asked every single one of them, does your boss micromanage you? Oh, no, she doesn't micromanage at all. Let me ask you this: if you're told to do something, there's 10 steps.
Mm-hmm.
You get the job done in 5, and you do it right. Will you still be in trouble? Of course I would be. I didn't follow her instructions. Well, that's micromanagement, right? Like she was more worried about following her steps than finding a more efficient way to get the job done, and that's what we got to reverse.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually learned this myself when I was running a company a number of years back, and I did some lean office training at the University of Michigan, and some of the things were so like startlingly obvious that it's embarrassing, at the point of efficiency and just simple things you can do. But then on reflection, I thought these are exactly what you're talking about, things that need to come almost from those directly affected. Like, for instance, there was one group in our company that used the printer and the fax machine nonstop, right? Their project management or something, I can't remember. They were the furthest group away from the printer. This is going back a bit, people I know, from the printer, copier, fax machine room. And when I did that course, it was like, how much time are they wasting a day getting up, going over, collecting stuff, then getting sidetracked on the way back? And so something that could be a 2-minute reach over to grab off a machine could end up being a half an hour, depending on how they get distracted. So moving them to right beside where the printers was made their lives easier. But that's something that, as I reflect, should have come from them. And that's what the kind of culture we try to create after that is: go find these things.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about in a curious culture is a curious culture tends to break down the vertical and horizontal silos.
Yeah.
Right. Normally, if you're rearranging an office space, it's being run by HR, maybe IT having a voice, not your admin staff, not your programming staff, not the staff that are using the copier, like you said, right? You're not bringing them into the discussion because they're not dictating where people sit and how we want our organization development to play out. But that's a perfect example where if you have that culture that breaks down those horizontal and vertical silos, it allows for that free flow of information to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we took it one step further. Then I decided I gave all the operations people to be bonused on profit. So then they were allowed to go and challenge the salespeople on gross margins, which had a really nice dynamic, and they started to question, why are we doing this? Why are we sending that? Why are we giving away this stuff for free? What does it add? All of that good stuff.
Right. 100%. Yeah. I mean, again, I've worked with someone who ran a business development department for organization that was basically, broke even on its revenue expense. And I'm like, a business development unit can't do that. I know that you're having fun doing your job, but this either needs to be profitable or cease to exist. And so like you get it, it's tough sometimes, right? So that was a very difficult conversation to have, and this person ended up leaving the organization. But it was one of those places where, again, we're trying to deliver certain results. This organization was in a decline. It had to make some tough decisions, and sometimes, when you are changing a culture, when you are creating an environment with more results driven aspects, not everyone's gonna last. Sometimes they're gonna leave on their own. Sometimes you have to force people to leave. But if you really want to build a culture, you got to allow that to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you build that culture, you'll be surprised. Yeah, you'll probably lose some people, but you'll be surprised of the capacity of other people who decide to stay and decide this is what they want to do. Suddenly, they almost turn into two people sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, majority of people, from what I've seen, people love clarity, right? They love to know what standards they're being held to, where they're going, and how to get there. And if you can create a culture, the curious culture around those elements, most people are going to stay. And
Yeah.
if there are people who do not like that, do you really want them working for your organization? And
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That was just great, John. Well, listen, thanks very much for this. All of John's information will be below this video. But before we go, please do tell people a little bit more about you and what you do.
Sure. So I call myself an operations management consultant. Spent my career launching and managing internal operations for startups, small businesses, and nonprofits. And our big focus right now is helping organizations get curious about their organization by doing these audits to really uncover their operations and be strategic about how they grow and be data driven, but also working with executives through coaching and culture assessments to help them see where their culture is and help them create a culture around curiosity to really help them drive innovation, growth, and change.
Yeah, listen, fantastic. And you mentioned you have a book coming out next year. So maybe you'll come back then and have a chat about the book when it's out.
Yeah, absolutely. February 18th right now is the release date. So people can go to my website. Actually, in the next week or so, there will be a link on there to access be on a list for pre-order the books to get a discount.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, the links to John will be below here. Go check it out and make this 2025 your year of curiosity. All right. Well, listen, thanks again, John. Thank you for watching, listening. See you all again soon. Thank you.